that you put on your website that you're HIPAA compliant, immediately I'm concerned.
Yes, exactly. Hello, and welcome back to Practical Cybersecurity. We are very excited today to have Donna Grindle on with us. Some of you have met her before, some of you have not. Please give us a little background, who you are and what you do.
Well, I am the co-host of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. But the way I actually make a living is my company, Cardin. I am the Don of Cardin. And we're a lean, mean fighting machine, but we're there to help those small and medium businesses. And it's not only healthcare now. We're getting more and more coming to us because they have to have a written prove they're paying attention to cybersecurity program for whether it's an accounting firm or even some small businesses that they just want to get cyber coverage because of what they do. Then you can't get it anymore unless you're willing to prove that you're taking it seriously.
At what point does a small business need to start worrying about HIPAA? Like, what triggers that obligation?
The easiest definition is you provide some sort of healthcare delivery. Now, it also applies to insurance companies. We're not talking about them because those are usually not a small business. So, healthcare delivery organization that files electronic claims for payment of services.
That's it in a nutshell. And so if people are listening, you're saying, oh, that's me, maybe we should pay attention to HIPAA. It doesn't even matter how small you are, right? But I know for sure that there are challenges that small organizations face with HIPAA. The larger, like you just said, we're not worried about the larger organizations. They have the staff. But when you work with these smaller organizations, what are some specific challenges that you see them dealing with?
Across the board, it's actually understanding what HIPAA means. It's been around so long, everybody assumes they understand it because they've sat through so many training classes. And the problem is those only apply if you're the one doing other work and you're supposed to follow HIPAA. The other stuff of the people in charge of building and managing the programs and being able to prove that you're doing it, that's not included in the standard HIPAA training. Not at all. So still to this day, when we say, what training has your compliance security officer, privacy officer, compliance officer, whatever you call them, what training have they had? And the number of times that we'll get, they read the Security 101 on the HHS class.
Yeah, and that's just not the same thing as building a program. So from that perspective, what do you see as the most common gaps in HIPAA programs?
Security risk analysis enforcement initiative started a while back, but it's the number one thing everybody does wrong. And if you do that wrong, your entire cybersecurity program that's supposed to do the security stuff is wrong. It's all wrong because all of it should be based on that.
Right. That's actually what the regulation says, right? Do this risk analysis and then build your program. And we don't see that.
I read things and it's like, we did an SRA, a security risk analysis, but our risk analysis doesn't include likelihood, impact, risk, strategy. And I'm like, then it's by definition not a risk analysis. More than likely, it's what's called a gap analysis. And that's the number one gap is a gap analysis is all they have.
So if we're talking about, what's the compliance strategy, it starts with having a program of some kind, and it starts with having a risk analysis of some kind. But if you were to tell a small business, this is where you start, what's that starting place feel like for most of them?
Believe it or not, I tell them you need to know everything you have. That's it. Just figure out everything you have. So here's your inventory for computer systems. Okay. Here's your inventory for network infrastructure. And we had to separate them because we used to try to get them on the same one, and all we would get were the computer systems.
Yeah. Because a lot of times that they have that, and they completely disregard everything else in the environment.
They just think of the computer systems, But you have to know what software is on all those systems. And now you also have to know what cloud applications, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, whatever you're using, you need to be keeping up with them as well, because you're putting PHI in them. And people are like, what do you mean? I got those are just handled because I'm doing. That doesn't mean there's this idea that if we hire an IT company, then cybersecurity is handled. And if we use a cloud application, then that security is handled. And that's not the case. I could never figure out, like in a big organization, they all have a data map. It's a thing. You have a data map. And that is just impossible to do a real one of those in a small environment. I've tried. And I am not going to torture people any more than I have to. So I did, and you were like, you asked people where do they use things, so we created our CREMATE. I have to have things for
absolutely.
CREMATE: create, receive, maintain, transmit, and we're like, sit down and tell me everywhere you create PHI.
Yes.
What are you using to create it? Is it a scan? Where's it coming from? Is in the receive, if you're receiving it from other offices, from hospitals or whatnot. Where do you maintain it? Meaning, what do you do with it when you get it? And who do you send it to? And how do you do it? Because if you do that, then you make sure that you put everything on the list right. Putting everything on the list right, make sure that you consider all the things that could go wrong and how you're going to deal with them. And that's an SRA.
But what's really crazy is that a lot of groups know one piece of that, but not other pieces of it. So how like you said, the IT knows the IT piece, but they don't know how the information gets. So they don't maintain, maybe, but they don't know how it gets in there. Like what?
And they don't know, for example, and that's the other thing is IT does our SRA. Then it's not an SRA.
It's not an SRA.
It's a part of one, and I'll take what they've done and incorporate it in a big one.
Yeah.
But that's not that is a piece of one. One area that we often, kind of get a deer in the headlights look is, what are the security settings in your EHR and how do you have them configured?
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of it.
That is part of it, yeah.
And IT does it. We're like, we never touch that.
And it's really hard sometimes getting whether it's internal IT team or maybe a third party, IT team, to talk to the people who are doing the processes that intake the information in the first place, because they have different focuses and they kind of talk in different ways.
IT cannot be the Department of No anymore. That's why they do things that you don't want them to do, because you're not saying, wow, you need to do this. How can I make you, give you the ability to do it securely? If there's no understanding, then communication didn't happen, And so I have had to work on it and I still.
It's hard.
It's hard. Really, really hard. Because acronyms come out that I don't even realize.
You don't even know that you're speaking a different language. Or that what you're asking is unreasonable, because you don't know enough about how just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a customer and they said to me, it was about password length. And they said, including the developers. And I said, yeah, it was for a different, assessment. This includes the developers too. And they said, are you sure it includes the developers? I said, look, I understand if any group is going to yell at me, it's going to be the developers, but it's because I don't speak their language clearly enough. Right. So in any situation, you can think that you're doing the best job possible. But if you don't know the specific language that the other group is using, like you said, you have to be aware of it.
That's why we have things like these frameworks, is so if everybody learns that, then we have the same language around it and we all know what it means. I'm on the Health Sector Coordinating Council Cybersecurity Working Group. We just say HSCC. And and been part of the 405D where we wrote HICP, and it has a general, guide for everybody to get everybody on the same page. And then there's a technical guide for small entities, and then a technical guide for medium and large. And I worked on the small entity one, and you would not believe the disagreements that everybody would have trying to figure out how to say something in a way everybody would understand it.
What would you say is maybe a good place to start for the must-haves for a limited budget for some of the security controls that absolutely have to be there?
Well, actually, I would start before that. Is you need to have a policy and procedure about policies and procedures and documentation. If you just start going and implementing things, but you don't have a plan for who's managing it, who's making sure it's actually working as intended, who's watching for all of these, who has all these responsibilities, how am I going to prove that, 5 years from now, we were doing this today?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have a plan for all of that, on the other side, I really haven't gained anything but the control.
Right. And nobody likes to do documentation.
No.
But it's critical to laying that groundwork, I think.
AI, there's a whole other conversation for us, but
yeah,
AI gives you a tool because you should be treating it like a really smart but not infallible assistant. In that documentation world, it's great because I can give it bullets and it'll write it up and say, is this correct? And then you have to be sure.
You have to read it at that point, of course.
You have to actually read it, and you can tell it to make changes, but you need to treat it like it's an employee doing it. You're making the decisions. The things are happening. All you have to do is write them down, or dictate them. You can have the tool sitting there open as you're making the decisions and doing things and dictate to it. If you don't have that plan to document it, it doesn't matter how much money you spend. You're going to end up wasting it.
And then this gets into, vendor management, business associate agreements. How do we leverage that to make sure that everything's being done that we think is being done?
That's a huge piece that, it's also that area of people realizing they're actually business associates. If you provide a service that requires you to potentially have access. So, we don't ever look at the EHR or the PHI. Yes, but you're in charge of the entire network and can break into it and do whatever you want.
Exactly.
The line there is, if you were doing this and not authorized to do it, would it be considered a cyber attack and a data breach? Then you're a business associate. You're outsourcing the liability somewhat, but not the responsibility.
Right. So when we're talking about third parties, what are some red flags that you have seen with organizations working with third parties that maybe they're not the right fit in a healthcare setting?
If you put on your website that you're HIPAA compliant, immediately I'm concerned.
Yes, exactly. Because according to whom?
Yeah. Who decided that? And, by the way, even the Office for Civil Rights in charge of enforcing it will not tell you that.
No, exactly.
They'll
tell you when you're not.
Yes, they will.
Those pulses we get.
Yeah. So they won't give you that designation, and there is no designation that they recognize.
That's a nice segue into this topic, which is, I don't want to scare people, but I don't know, maybe I do want to scare people. What happens when things go wrong? What happens when you have a breach and have to report it to OCR? What goes on then?